Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Excel series. We are on our second session of the day, and give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen so you can see it. All right, can everybody see my screen now? Okay, good to go. All right. So our second session of the day is Excel your search query reports with these must-have tips. I'll be your moderator. My name is Jamie Newton, and I am the communications manager here at Hanapin. And your presenter today is Alaina Thompson. She is an account manager at Hanapin, a PPC Hero blogger, and she was also the Excel workshop instructor for HeroConf London, which just happened this past October. Hello, Alaina. How are you doing today?
Good, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
Good. We're excited to hear about your presentation.
Yeah, I'm always pumped for Excel.
If you want to tweet at Alaina, you can at Alaina P. Thompson. All right, we're going to go through a quick few housekeeping things real quick. If you want to join the conversation, include the hashtag ThinkPPC in your Twitter tweets, or send us your questions through the question box on the panel. A quick thing about who Hanapin is, we run the world's most popular PPC blog and largest PPC conference, that is PPC Hero and HeroConf. We manage and optimize global paid search, paid social, and display programs, and within 12 months, brands can expect a 250% increase in their growth trajectory. Here's a brief look at our clients. Weather Channel, Iceland Air, Shoe Carnival. We work with a lot of awesome big brands. Okay, a quick poll question. So, are you doing PPC analysis on a Mac or PC? This is just a quick thing to see what our audience is using. Alaina, what do you use?
Well, for Hanapin, we all use Macs, which was quite a shift for me. I came from having a personal PC and then also teaching a business course at the business school here at Indiana University, and they all use PCs, and they actually don't recommend using Macs just for the Excel work that we were doing. So I kind of use both, but lately I've been using a Mac.
Perfect. All right, let's see. Oh, a good chunk of our audience is using PC. Okay, great to know. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. All right, without further ado, Alaina, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. We'll just go ahead and jump into the agenda for today. So I'll briefly just tell you how I came about this pivot table process for my search query reports, and then we'll get into some step-by-step solutions for your SQRs, along with an example of keyword expansion versus an example of limited spend, and how you would adjust your pivot table to give you that information. So we'll just go ahead and jump into the reason why I got started with these search query reports via pivot tables in Excel. So my first few months at Hanapin, I was pretty new to PPC, and some of the first tasks that were assigned as we're learning are search query reports. And I feel like this GIF is really shows my emotions after my first few search query reports. I was just very, very frustrated, and it felt like everyone else was completing their tasks at light speed compared to how long it took me to do a search query report. And as a lot of you know, one of the reasons for that is because when you download search terms from AdWords, you end up with potentially thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of search terms, depending on your company size and how many campaigns you're looking at, as well as the date range. But in general, I was ending up with, as you can see in this image, about 20,000 rows. And anyone that uses Excel, whether it's on a PC or a Mac, you know that a certain number of rows eventually slows down Excel and occasionally makes it crash. So that was really frustrating, and it was also just really easy to get lost in this quantity of data. And the more rows that you have, I feel like the easier it is to have room for error, and you end up overlooking search queries because you get a little bit overwhelmed with how much data there is. So I finally got to the point where I went to my supervisor and I said, I just can't do this anymore. There's got to be a better way. Please help me. I don't know if I'm just incredibly slow or if there's a much simpler way to do this. And my supervisor kindly showed me the simpler way to do this, which is the Excel pivot table. So we'll just jump into kind of why this is a better solution than just sorting and filtering thousands of rows, and then we'll jump into the step-by-step. So unfortunately, since this is a webinar, I can't tell if you guys are chuckling with me, but I really like Friends, and anytime I say anything on the blog about an Excel pivot table, I reference this moment.
It's a good moment, Alaina.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't watched Friends, I highly recommend watching this clip on YouTube. But pivot tables are really, really awesome in terms of PPC analysis overall, but especially for your search query reports. So some of the benefits that I've listed here are that your pivot tables aggregate the data that you have. So instead of having a search term when you download it from AdWords, it could be listed multiple times within all of those rows you've downloaded because it could have matched to a variety of keywords in your account. And every time there's a new match or a new combination of search term and keyword, it gets listed in a separate row. So like I said, one search term could appear 10 times, which just exponentially adds to the amount of search queries that you have, whereas a pivot table can aggregate all of those terms into one clean row. And then, like I said, it's clear and simple sorting. When you're sorting and filtering on an Excel doc with thousands of rows, like I said, it often makes Excel angry, and your Excel might shut down before you have saved, or you just get really lost in all of that data. So you're eliminating all the rows of scrolling, and you can also find multiple takeaways from the same set of data. So like I said before, we're going to go through 2 step-by-step processes, and one pivot of the same set of data can show you how to increase your spend because of the search queries you have, or it can help you to eliminate wasted spend. So we're going to start by looking at a pivot table that is specifically for expansion. So first you need to go into AdWords. You could also go into Bing, although some of you know that there's slightly less metrics in Bing, but in this case you could find all of these numbers in Bing. So we're going to grab all of these columns and just make sure that you have the search term as well as the keyword in there. And if this is an e-commerce account, you're probably going to want your total conversion value, also known as your revenue, if your goals are return on ad spend oriented. If you're working with a lead gen account, you're probably going to want to be able to calculate cost per lead, meaning you would need your cost and your conversions, which we also have here. So like I said, I generally use these pivots for 2 different types of SQR reporting, keyword expansion or limited spend. We're going to go through keyword expansion, but in either situation, it's really helpful to have some sort of column or label that tells you if the word that you're looking at matched to a branded keyword or a non-branded keyword. And so if you don't already have brand as a label with maybe just as a keyword label or as a part of your campaign naming convention, then I would go ahead and add it. So this is what you would do if you don't already have brand in your campaign. You can download all of this data from AdWords and then add another column to that, and then sort your campaigns by brand or ad group, or sort to find the branded situations, whether that's in your campaigns or your ad groups. So in this case, you can see in the drop down that I have, all of the campaigns from this account have branded in the name. So I've selected just those campaigns, and then in my new column that I've added, I'm basically creating a label, but it's just not an AdWords label, it's just for my Excel sheet. And I'm going to fill brand down for that entire section of campaigns that are branded, and then for all of the rest, I'll add a non-brand label, and that will help us with the analysis moving forward. So then the next step is just going to be selecting all of your data and creating the pivot table. So a really nice Excel shortcut is just to hit Control A, and that works on a Mac or a PC. It will select all of the cells with data that are located next to each other or consecutive. And then you can just, on a Mac, you would go to Insert, Pivot Table, as you can see in the top. And then from there, we start to build out our pivot. So we are looking at search terms that generate revenue or leads, because like I said, we're looking to expand in this scenario, and this is an e-commerce client. So we want to look for search terms that are currently meeting or exceeding the return on ad spend goal that this client has. So we start with our filters, which you can see in the top left. Just a side note, if you're unfamiliar or relatively new to pivot tables, this is called the builder, and you have 4 different pieces to your builder. The top left is filters, and then you have columns, rows, and values, and these are all located in the same position within the builder as they are in the actual pivot. So in the top left are your filters, and in the top left of the actual pivot are the filters, and then your rows are on the far left, columns are on the top, and then your values are everything that falls in between the rows and the columns. So all of that being said, I'm looking for expansion opportunities in this situation. So I have pulled the campaign and the match type into filters. The reason being, if I'm looking for expansion, I'm probably not going to find that within my branded campaigns. Your brand, you should have all of the keywords that are related to your brand in that campaign, and there's very unlikely that you've got some sort of broad match word that's converting in there that you didn't already have as an exact keyword. So I filtered the campaign to exclude all of the branded campaigns, or if you use that new label that you just created in the last step, you could sort that way as well. And then we're also only looking at the broad match types. So the reason being there, if a keyword, or I'm sorry, if a search term exactly matched to a keyword, then you already have that keyword in your account and you can completely own that bid and control the bid. If a search term matched broadly, then you clearly don't have that exact search term in your account, and maybe you want to add it so that you can control that bid a little bit more and expand the account that way. So we're only looking at broad matches, and this is what we get so far. So if we're looking, we put our search term into the rows section, which looks like this. And I've done a lot of finding and replacing with these values and search terms, so these are probably search terms. If you look through them, a lot of them may not make sense because I wanted to keep the data private, but we also have the values over here. So we have our impressions, our conversion values, and our cost. So right now we have a ton of words, search terms that only came through once because they were incredibly specific search terms. So we want to clean this up a little because we don't need to spend time in a search query report on search terms that only had one impression. The odds of that search term appearing again in the account are slim to none. So we're going to eventually filter out a lot of those search terms that didn't have the impressions. First, though, we want to know if these search terms are meeting goals. That's one way to kind of filter through this data. So we're going to add a calculated field based on goals. Like I said, this is an e-commerce example, so we're going to look at return on ad spend. If you're lead generation, you might be looking at cost per lead. So when you, on a Mac, it's the double click on your mouse pad, or if you just right click on, I believe on regular PC, you would right click and you can add, as you see here, you can add a formula and a calculated field. And then what that's going to look like is this, at least on a Mac, but you should have the same options within a PC. And when you add that calculated field, it's just going to let you create a formula based on fields that you already have. So return on ad spend in this case is my conversion value field divided by my cost. And that's going to be called return on ad spend, and that gets added into the pivot that I have. So from there, we want to sort by that goal so that I can see which search terms are actually meeting that goal. And you can see here in this pivot table, if you want to sort these search terms, you have to use this button up here at the top, and then you'll get these two options, sort and filter. For sort, we're, like I said, descending by goal, so I can see at the very top which search terms are exceeding the goal and which ones, the ones that are not exceeding the goal will be towards the bottom. So you can see that that's working so far. In this screenshot over on the far right, we have all of the incredibly high return on ad spend search terms. However, you can see that the reason that those return on ad spend are so high is because the impressions were between 1 and 5, which is very insignificant statistically, and we don't really want to bet on the fact that, for example, Nike Boys Flex Experience Running Sandals Red, that should be an exact search term in the account. It's incredibly specific. It's only had 1 impression. So really, it's not worth our time right now because it's not likely to happen again. So instead, we want to, like I said, filter out these low impression search terms. But we don't want to use the filter that's in the builder. We actually want to go back to this drop down that we have here that's in the search terms section of the pivot, and we're going to use the filter there. And we have two options, filter by label or filter by value. So I'm filtering by value, and I'm saying I want impressions to be greater than 30. I'm doing this in this section because now that all of this data is in the pivot, everything is aggregated for these search terms. So if, for example, Converse for Kids had 2,700 impressions, so that had to be more than one user out there that was searching for that. And that means that probably appeared multiple times in the report that I downloaded from AdWords, but it could have, that search term could have matched to multiple keywords. Since I put it into the pivot, all of those times that it happened are now aggregated into one row. So now that it's aggregated, that's when I want to filter by values. You don't want to use numeric values in the filter that's in the pivot builder, which we already used in previous steps. So we're going to filter by values greater than 30 so that we have some statistical significance. And you could always change that number based on how big the account is. But now you can see all of these search terms have been searched for multiple times, and while cost was still pretty low for some of these, you can see, for example, Converse for Kids had the most impressions, $80 worth of cost, which certainly means it's been clicked multiple times, but at the end of the day that brings us to return on ad spend that's less than 100%. So that's probably not somewhere that I would want to expand in the account. That's really up to you. But the point of these pivots is to quickly show you the highest performing, the lowest performing keywords so that you don't waste your time looking at thousands of rows. And so here we have 6 search terms with significant return on ad spend that maybe could be added to the account depending on how much you want to expand and how many long tail keywords you want to have in the account. So that is the expansion example. We're now going to move into a limited spend example, but since we already worked through the creation of the pivot, we're just going to walk through what you would add to your builder. So here you can see we're kind of looking at the opposite. We want to look for search terms that have high cost and are not meeting goals at all. I still have the same filters, the campaign and match type, although this time, because I'm looking to save money, I'm including all of my brand campaigns as well. And then I'm still looking at broad match terms because those should be the first place that you would want to clean up your search terms, because obviously if it's an exact match, you put that keyword into your account for a reason. So again, we have still included the return on ad spend column, but what I've done is I've moved it to the top of the values that are listed within the builder. So now it's in the first column, and then when I sort, I'm sorting by cost descending so I can see the most expensive words at the top, and then I'm filtering by labels, which I'm filtering by values that are less than or equal to 2. What that's doing is filtering by the sum of the, filtering by the return on ad spend that's less than or equal to 200%. And so you can see all of these search terms had either 0% for the most part or less than 200% of return on ad spend, and they had some sort of cost, although a lot of them are not too high, as you can see in the far right column over here. The highest we had was $80, which is where we had that less than 100% return on ad spend. So these are search terms that you might want to, if they were higher cost, I would probably add these as negatives in the account. It's your call at what point of cost do you add these as a negative. But if you really are limiting your budget, then you might want to start limiting some of these broad search terms from your account if they don't seem to convert. All right, so we just want to walk through some of these takeaways. You should definitely use pivot tables to aggregate your search term statistics across an entire account or set of campaigns. In addition, pivot tables eliminate the need to look at every row of an AdWords search query download. And finally, when you create custom columns and use filters, you can see which terms are truly meeting your account goals, and not only that, but you can do it very quickly. And that is all that I wanted to cover for today.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Alaina. We have a lot of questions coming in. But real quick, before we get into the live Q&A, I just want to tell you a little bit about HeroConf if you've not heard this yet. So we will be going to Los Angeles in April for HeroConf. And HeroConf is the largest all PPC conference in the world. So it's paid search, paid social, programmatic, display, mobile, etc. Lots of great speakers, a very fun event. As I said earlier,
Really
Alaina just ran the Excel workshop in London, which was in October. It'll be in October again in 2017. And we will have another Excel workshop at HeroConf LA. So if you are interested in that, go to heroconf.com, click the LA section, and you will be able to see all the programming that we have available and then speakers as they come available. All right, so as I mentioned in the very first session is at Hanapin, we know how scary it is to work with an agency. There are certain things you need to look out for when you are working with an agency, and we've put together a list to let you know, how to determine if the agency you're working with or are planning to hire is throwing out any red flags. One of the things that we notice as a business in our potential client conversations is that they do not have access to their Google AdWords account or their Bing Ads account. And that's a very big red flag for us because you should always have that transparency and you should always be able to get access into your own account. So if you don't have account access right now, make sure you get that. That's a big deal. Okay, we'll keep that up for just a little bit, and we will go on to the live Q&A. So, Alaina, what is our first question?
Yeah, so we actually had a few questions about the version of Excel that I was using, and I definitely should have mentioned that from the start. But like I said, we work on Macs here at Hanapin, but recently we updated to Office 365 Pro. So I thought that was the best version to use for you guys because Office 365 is becoming the next generation of Microsoft Office because we get those automatic updates. And I know at the university that I work for, they're also moving to Office 365 in the next couple of years. So there's going to be a lot more similarities between what would be considered a Mac version versus a PC version of Excel. And the Mac version already looks a lot more similar than what I'm used to, or yeah, a lot more similar than to the PC version. So, and if anything, the Mac version tends to be the least improved, I guess you could say. The Microsoft version on a PC was always, of course, the most up to date. So I felt like if we use the Mac version, if you guys are watching and you're using a PC, chances are your steps are actually going to be simpler than what I had to go through to do the same actions on a Mac. All right, so there's another question that's, I think, really good. What is the best date range to use for your SQR? 30 days, less, more? So this is dependent upon the traffic in the account. If you are an e-commerce client, or you're working for an e-commerce client, or you're an e-commerce company, generally 30 days is more than enough data to work with. However, lead generation campaigns and accounts tend to have higher value product and thus less conversions to work from. And so it's harder to get a true understanding of what the cost per lead is without taking 3 to 6 months of data. So make that date range decision based on how much data you have so that you can so that you're really pulling a statistically significant set of data versus maybe a lead gen account that only had 2 really large conversions in the last 30 days. That's really not going to help you optimize too much. So let's see. There's a lot of great questions, you guys. I'm trying to figure out where to go. One that I think is interesting that we didn't cover is which analysis could be done using pivot tables. So aside from doing your search query reports, another situation where we do pivot tables is like a time of day analysis or a geographic analysis. Any of those large pieces of, or large sets of data that you can download from AdWords from the Dimensions tab. When you download them, they often end up being thousands of rows, but when you aggregate them all together, you can see, across 6 months, if it's your time of day, you can see in general at 1 o'clock, our cost per lead is this, our return on ad spend is this, because you're aggregating those hours. Or same thing with geolocations across multiple campaigns. Do we have time for another question?
We have time for a real quick question. And then we'll need to get ready for Jacob Fairclough's presentation.
Great. All right. You guys have so many good ones. I'm trying to make sure we pick one that applies to a lot of us. Let's see. All right, the final question. Why would this approach to search query analysis be better than something like a script where it analyzes the performance of queries at the term level? For example, queries with Amazon and then perform poorly. This allowed you to block bad traffic before they become significant in the query level. That's a great question. Scripts are awesome, and I'm not going to deny that. But one reason I think these search query reports are great is because they're easy to do. Scripts are a little bit more tedious if you're not used to them and implementing them. But yeah, if you have time for scripts, those are great. The only other thing is I think sometimes these analyses are better with a personal touch. Scripts don't always understand the context of a product or a service or the mindset of your audience. So if you think that you have a basic enough product or a basic enough campaign, maybe a script could help you in that situation. But I think sometimes you need a personal touch when you're looking at these search queries to know, okay, my client, while that by a script's definition would be great for our account, I actually know that our client doesn't want to associate with that search term for reasons X, Y, and Z. So yes, scripts are great, but if you feel like you have a very specific product, it's nice to have personal touch on your search query reports. And I think that's all we've got.
That's all we've got time. Thank you, Alaina, so much. I'm sorry to all of you that we did not get to your question. We had a lot of great questions come in and just did not have the time to get to all of them. As you'll see on your screen right now, if you do have questions that you need help with, you can either send us an email at marketing@hanapinmarketing.com or feel free to tweet at Alaina at Alaina P. Thompson. All right, we will get started in just a couple of minutes with Jacob Fairclough's presentation. So we're going to take a real quick break and get him in here, and then we will start up in just about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, thank you everybody that joined us today, and we'll see everybody else that's planning to stick around.